All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Georgetown School Committee meeting of Thursday, April 12th, 2012, and it's now called to order. First item on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes regular session minutes of March 22nd, 2012, and the acceptance of warrants 41V12 and 42P12. The chair will entertain a motion to...
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a fill-in for Matt Hartford tonight, as our student rep, Zach Graham, is here. Zach,
Welcome,
right?
Zach.
Okay.
Hey, Zach.
Hi. Because Matt is not participating, he's helping out with Dancing with the Stars.
That's right.
So if you want to just tell us what's going on at the high school?
Right now we're just getting ready to wrap up before the April break. Sports team's doing well. Boys lacrosse has a game tomorrow. Girls play today. And not really much. We obviously got the big performance tonight down at the high school. A lot of people are involved in that. Which is basically the only big thing that's going on at the time right now.
All right.
All right, great. Well, thanks very much for coming. Next, do you want to call your meeting?
Sure. So I'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Pretty much that's it. We have a quorum, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Phil's right behind.
So, just so everyone at home knows, we're going through the preferred option for the Pembroke School, and it requires a vote by the school committee as well as the Board of Selectmen to approve it. So we have the co-chairs of the school building committee, Ellie Sinkwitz and Michelle Smith, are here, as well as our architects and our project manager.
Yep.
As well. So they're just going to give us a quick run through of where we are, answer any questions that we might have, and then we'll take a vote. So do you guys want to come up here? How do you... Sure. Whatever the best way. If you want to pull more chairs around, that's fine too. I don't know. Dave, if you want to pull chairs, it's...
Yeah, you want to...
Yeah, you want to be able to see the board.
Yeah, you want to be able to see.
I can stay over. You can slide down. Hello, ladies. Hello. Hello.
And I think there's some chairs over here too, if you want to...
Yeah.
Almost
You can always pull people.
All right.
All right.
This open.
Right. Because you want to be able to see. Can you see okay? Amazing how much.
All right.
Okay. It's good.
So do you want to do your...
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We'll just remind everybody why we're here. In
Okay.
January, the MSBA came and toured all the Georgetown schools. They felt, after seeing it, it would be in our best interest to expand our feasibility study from K through 6 to also look at K through 7 and K through 8. They wanted the town to be sure that moving just grade 6 out of the high school would leave enough space to meet the needs of the high school. And DRA did that study for us. They presented their findings. The school committee saw many of them at the last meeting. Some of the selectmen have seen some of them. Carl's going to go over everything, the final study, because it's now completed. And this will be our opportunity to see what he uncovered, ask questions, and then we'll vote.
Right. In addition to the space issues, they did also go through all the points that were on the NEASC report to make sure that most of those were being addressed by just pulling out the 6th grade as well.
Great.
So would you like to?
Okay, sure.
I'll turn it over to Carl.
For the school committee folks, the material is very similar to what we presented, what was
Okay.
it, 2 weeks ago, I guess, at your previous meeting. You know, a lot of selectmen have attended a few of these meetings and seen it also, but I'll quickly go over the process. As Ellie and Michelle mentioned, the study was expanded basically to look at the middle high school and the spaces being vacated. First, if we move just the sixth grade to the Pembroke, would that be enough to address the various issues at the high school? Or, what would be available if we moved 6th and 7th and then 6th, 7th, and 8th? What we did was we analyzed the existing building, comparing it with the accreditation report, those issues that were cited, with MSBA standards for classroom sizes and square footage per student. And also, we did interview the principal and department heads and teachers and identified any programmatic, deficiencies that were at the high school. And then fourth, we and our engineers looked at facilities issues there as well, which, the facilities issues in and of themselves aren't going to be addressed necessarily just by, moving students out of there. But the MSBA felt that it was appropriate to look at those simultaneously so that, one, we could confirm that, by proposing and building a new elementary school, that we're not, overlooking, a more needy situation at the middle high school, but one that could be addressed in there. So one way we summarized the findings were on these floor plans where we identified spaces that were deficient versus spaces that, were acceptable and some that were marginal. So we went through floor by floor. So this is the third floor. You can see there's a couple deficiencies there of inappropriate spaces or spaces that are too small. We went through again, spaces that are poorly located, windowless, too small, windowless there, too small there. So those are the red spaces that are identified on each floor as issues. And on the lowest level, again, this is a former woodworking shop that's been, somewhat makeshift fashion, has been carved into 3 classrooms. They're not really appropriate. They're too small. Over the years, a few special ed spaces have been inserted, causing the space to be undersized there. There's a backstage area here to the stage that's now being used as a classroom.
Could you maybe stand on the other side, or that way we look over at that, because we can't see what you're talking about.
Okay.
Could you stand on the other side, because they can look
I
straight on
probably
that
have
way.
to dance around
No,
the
that's all
area
right.
too. But, so there, these series of inappropriate spaces as well as spaces that are too small, and they're highlighted on these plans. And as we say, in addition, we did produce a list of facilities issues too, that we've distributed. I don't have that on a board, but we did summarize that and share it with the building committee. The most serious of which people probably understand is the drainage issue at the high school. The high school is situated on a hillside. It's really, if you think of it sort of hydrologically, it's like a dam. There's groundwater, there's surface water that wants to flow downhill and find its way eventually to Pembroke itself. The building is inserted there. It needs to have drainage to direct the water around it. There is some there. It's not adequate to handle the volume, and it needs to be upgraded. And because of that water issue, there are some issues on the interior of the school. It affects the finishes on the ground floor, the concrete. Vapor comes through. It causes the flooring to break up in places. It causes high humidity levels in some of those spaces, air quality issues. Those need to be addressed regardless of what grades are in the school. So we did identify issues like that as well, because again, that was one of the things the MSBA saw in their tour.
Carl, can I just we just went through your whole analysis of the building and
Yep.
identified the red, the green, and the yellow
Yes.
spaces that we have. I just want to be clear, or my opinion is that we got to this because of the population that has grown over the years. It's not that this building, was initially designed poorly, or there were, there were
Yes.
design standards at that time that we met, and it met the population needs at the time.
Right.
Not-
We couldn't confirm the exact population projections that were done back in 96,
Okay.
97. But we certainly know that classroom size standards have changed a bit, so that what
Right.
used to be acceptable now is a little bit small. The population has increased, certainly from that period in time. And special ed, for instance, requirements have changed since that time too. There are more of those spaces in the building than there were at the time it opened after the last
Okay,
renovation.
yeah, I just wanted to be clear because,
Right.
certainly we did I'm assuming they did the best that they possibly could have in 1996, and things have just changed.
Yes. yes,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
So what we did to identify strategies, I'm gonna have to dance back and forth there, so sorry. On this board, we thought of the moves that could happen once starting at the third floor, once the sixth grade classrooms, they basically occupy this end of the building and this science room. Once those spaces are freed up, how could other programmatic spaces be moved around to occupy those spaces to relieve the overcrowding? And one of the things that we immediately realized is that we could move up some spaces from down below to occupy these spaces. We could take some spaces that were interior spaces, windowless rooms, move them to the perimeter of the building. We could take spaces that were in undersized classrooms and move them to full-size classrooms. So we went through that floor by floor, move by move, and identified it. I don't think we have to go through in quite that level of detail, but that's basically what we did to see if that alone would relieve those deficient spaces. So we did do it. Let me flip this right here. You can see on the third floor. Likewise, a list. There's 11 different things here, some of which are moving spaces to freed up spaces upstairs, taking interior spaces, moving them to the perimeter, turning those into like a teacher workroom, expanding the computer lab to be the right size, accommodating special ed in appropriate spaces there, adding to storage in the building, which was a deficiency. Oh yes, and one other issue, the gymnasium there. Many of you may know that was cited as a safety issue by the accreditation board, primarily for when it's used as for basketball games and the bleachers are pulled out. There's insufficient sort of safety apron around the court, both on where the players' benches are and on the spectators' side. One way to improve that, and again, it has nothing really to do with whether we pull out 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade, but it can be corrected within the volume of the existing gym if the court were to be relocated to free up more space along sort of the north wall here, and if the bleachers were to be replaced on this south wall here to allow, so when they're fully open, you'd have the proper safety apron there. And you could compensate for the lack of number of rows by making them wider. There's spaces at either end that could be freed up and space in the middle that if the bleachers went wall to wall, there's actually a net loss of only like 20 seats overall, and the safety of the space would be improved. So that could be addressed. And as we said, we did make a list of these issues so that Finance Committee and Selectmen and all could consider those for future funding as part of capital repairs. As we say, it's sort of independent of the programmatic requirements for the school. At the lowest level, the largest move is really looking at this former wood shop and renovating it with new finishes, new systems, ventilation, power, lighting, so that it could better accommodate the functions down there and free up some spaces that are now inappropriate. First of all, one thing could be restored to be a legitimate art room. The middle school art room is kind of in a makeshift space down there now. That could be made more appropriate. The chorus could be taken out of the auditorium and brought over here. The theater arts, which currently is in this backstage area, could be brought over here as well. There's space for those 3 programs in there. And the woodworking program could share that space and also get a dedicated project room right here adjacent to their CAD drafting room. Life Skills, a special ed program, is in a small inappropriate space there. This space here will be freed up when kindergarten and 1st grade are pulled out of the Pearly School. These special ed offices can be returned to the Pearly School because they're part of central administration. They're not necessarily tied to the middle high school. So that space is much more appropriate for the Life Skills program, and that would allow the science room to grow and be restored. So that series of moves, again itemized on this floor, basically results in a school that when we sort of did it in a comparable fashion now to the, and I can put up the before and afters, I guess, so you can see that if I bring up the third floor. You know, so it used to look like that in terms of the red and green spaces. We eliminate the deficiencies here by adding windows to what are currently windowless classrooms and through those other series of moves. There are a couple spaces here that are sort of technically small, these practice rooms related to the music program. It's a relatively minor deficiency. You know, I think they're 90 square feet instead of 120, but they're still functional, and they weren't, you know, an issue with the music department in their current condition there. So likewise, you want to bring up the second floor there? On the second floor, you know, it used to look like that, now it looks like this. The one remaining deficiency is a windowless classroom, but in the end it's virtually the only one out of an inventory of some 50 or 60, you know, classroom spaces. Again, a relatively small percentage of the overall, but otherwise all the other deficiencies on this floor get addressed, including the gym.
Carl, the windowless classrooms, was that just a design feature when were those supposed to be classrooms and they just...
They were. Back then, there wasn't as much concern about that as there is today.
Okay.
And it is valid. I mean, there is some research that shows students perform better when there's natural light and so forth. And certainly in a new school, we would try to avoid that nowadays. But it's not against any regulation or anything like that.
And it was just the way that they designed
and there
it.
are certain spaces, like computer rooms, that's actually appreciated. You know, you eliminate the glare on the screens, and being in a room like that for that sort of function is perfectly fine. And then on the first floor, just to compare again, virtually no deficiencies left after the moves. You know, again, I think we had one small space here or something, janitor's closet, but otherwise all of the issues are resolved by pulling out the 6th grade and doing some investment. As we said, there's some capital repairs that are needed here. So we did a similar analysis for pulling out the 6th and 7th grade, and 6th, 7th, and 8th. But as you can imagine, if we can solve it just by pulling out one grade, pulling out more than that becomes a bit of a luxury, and it makes, obviously, the Pembroke project that much bigger, that much more expensive, and actually becomes a burden, you know, on that site. You're increasing the traffic, you're increasing the earthwork, and so forth. So when we did our analysis here of comparing, let me see, there's this one. What would happen is, here's the K through 6 plan, where the high school would become 7 through 12. That's the plans we just went through. These figures are exactly as they were last December, November, when we came up with the original. These are construction costs, but the construction cost for K through 6 is somewhere in the range of $36 million.
That's 100%.
Yes, that's the full project cost, not the cost to Georgetown. If it were a K through 7 building, it jumps up to $46 million. If it were a K through 8 building, it goes to $51 million. So, you know, these are significant increases. The lines down below here are the repair costs, and both the programmatic ones. In other words, you know, to renovate this wood shop, we've made some ballpark estimates. It really wasn't officially part of our scope, but just to give you some idea, the changes we talked about are somewhere in the range of $600,000, $700,000, just programmatically. Again, that's not fixing the drainage. That's fixing, you know, that's creating these classrooms and doing those amount of renovation. The drainage and the capital repairs that have to be done anyways are in this line here. You know, we've shown them at roughly $1.5 million there. And we understand that there may be some, for the drainage, FEMA mitigation money available for that. So, yes,
Can you
Dave?
just mention that $36.5 million is construction cost only?
Yes, that's right.
That's not the bottom line.
That's not
number.
project cost. Project cost, I think, was 46, Chuck? Yeah, I think it was 46 million, when you include, you know, furniture and equipment, fees, contingency, all that, the total, which is eligible for reimbursement. But MSBA does ask us to sort of compare construction costs, first of all, when we look at options. So that's what we were showing there. So obviously, if we can address the issues at the middle high school with a K-6 building, it makes a financial sense, economic sense, compared to the other options there. And from a space point of view, I don't know if we have that one. Do we have that board? There it is. Thanks, Courtney. We compared the options again. This is the K-6. This is if we went to K-7 and K-8. And I know you can't read those, but we created some criteria to evaluate each option, to look at the pluses and minuses. And obviously, a big one is the cost. There's a significant difference in the cost of those options. But another one, just to illustrate the difference in space here, that if we were to pull out just the 6th grade, the 7 through 12 building actually comes very close to the MSBA standard for space, square footage per student. It's 192, and the standard is 199 square feet per student. If we were to pull out 2 grades, the resulting building is the same size. We have fewer students in it. Now the area per student goes up to 233 versus 200. It's 30. That's 15% higher. And if we pull out all 3 grades, it actually goes up to almost 300 square feet per student against a standard of 200. That's 50% higher than and MSBA appreciates those numbers when we show them to them in a couple of recent work sessions. They understood those immediately and recognized the same thing, that you'd end up with kind of more classrooms than you need there if you only had 9 through 12 at the middle high school for the projected enrollments. So when you put these factors together, in the end we recommended and the building committee endorsed doing a K-6 for the Pembroke School and converting the high school to 7 through 12. And just to show you where we're at in the design of that, too. Oh, sorry, yes.
The middle high school repairs, does that include addressing the roof issues at all, or is that a separate issue?
We had patching in there for the roof, because there's sort of selective areas where it's leaking, and at this time we didn't include the entire roof replacement. It may prove to be more feasible to do that. We wanted to be a little, tighter on what we were looking at, and not, comprehensive in replacing more than might be needed. In terms of the actual K-6 option, this is the site plan that we're suggesting, and again, this is not the design phase yet. We're still going to go through that. Really, the step right now, the vote that you need to take tonight, is to endorse the preferred alternative, which means when we've looked at all the alternatives for addressing the needs of the Pembroke School, whether renovating the existing building or adding on or building in the fields or in the woods, we're endorsing the proposal to build a new K-6 school in the wooded area south of the existing building. We're not truly necessarily endorsing this design just yet. We're just looking for permission from the MSBA to enter into that phase, to do schematic design. And we'll spend the next several months doing that. But they do need to sort of understand conceptually, what are we voting on. And so to orient you again, this is a sort of blow up of a portion of the site. The existing building is just on the edge of the drawing there. The driveway coming in from Elm Street is here. The existing parking lot for the teachers is right here. And so the developed part of the site ends right here, right now. So this proposal, like we showed last November, basically extends that driveway into the site. It comes all the way around here, so you can see we're adding a great deal of driveway space for cars to queue up for afternoon pickup, so that we don't impact the neighbors on Elm Street. We minimize that, certainly, because we're virtually doubling the length of the driveway that's there. Granted, the enrollment's increasing too, because we're going from grades 2 to 5 to K-6, but the driveway is increasing more than proportionally to that enrollment increase. And we're also adding parking. So we're giving, you might say, parents options too as to waiting in the queue or parking and picking up their child that way, for functions, for use of the fields. That's one of the advantages of designing it on this side of the property, is that in the end we get longer queuing space, we get better separation of buses from cars, which is a real issue today out there, where they overlap to a great extent. We get added parking. We get less disruption to the existing program, because the school, the fields, the driveways all can remain as they are through the entire construction process in developing this portion of the site. By bringing the driveway in this far too, we also make that connection to a possible emergency access back to Elm Street, so that there'd be 2 access points. So it increases safety from that point of view as well. And in the end, the other benefit is you end up with more fields. In addition to the existing ones, you'd pick up a couple of overlapping fields right on the footprint of the school once the school is demolished and that site redeveloped.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
This has probably been addressed in the past, but is there any possibility that there be a connection between school property directly to 97?
Not directly. There's another, I forget the name of that street. East Street. That's separated by a piece of state-owned land. This proposal, we've talked about that. This proposal allows for that consideration in the future. It would be in this direction here. It would feed this site, and act in a very similar way to this emergency access if that were to be pursued. But the town has the ability to do that sort of independent of this. We felt, and we talked about this at the committee, with the MSBA approval process and all, if the plan depended on that, the MSBA wouldn't allow us to proceed yet until that was nailed down. And if that's going to take years of discussion and so forth, we want to allow that to happen, but we don't want to make this dependent on that happening. So it can happen, and it would be a good improvement to the site to help relieve traffic flow there, if that could happen. But we know there are some issues. That's public land, that's state land. It was donated with a certain restriction, I think, of not being developed in the future, and so whether you could put a driveway across it is sort of a legal issue that's going to be discussed with the state. Sure. The layout of the footprint of the building is a bit refined from where we were last November, and we hope to develop this further. It's still a multi-story building, primarily 3 stories in one part of it, but 1 story in other parts. As we said, the driveway comes around here, so that drop off and visitor parking, and this is the front of the school, so there's a front entrance there. The classroom wings are all to the front of the building. The cafeteria is in the center and the gym is to the rear. There is a secondary entrance that is served by buses here coming around. Students could enter there, kind of at the cafeteria gym point, and that would also serve as an after-hours entrance. And the academic wing is sort of separated with the youngest children, kindergarten here, 1st and 2nd grade on the ground level, on the other side, with administration in the middle. As you move up the building, it could be 3rd and 4th grade, and then 5th and 6th at the top, as this stacks up to 3 stories. And the library would be in the center of the building on the 2nd floor. The cafeteria is in the center with playground areas immediately adjacent to it on either side. The gym at one end, and as we said, there could be a secondary access point there. If the gym's open in the evening, you could close off the rest of the school and only open that entrance. People would park here or even along this drive and enter there and leave, and there'd be restroom facilities there and proper egress, but you could close off the rest of the school. If there were an event in the cafeteria, which has a stage, people could come in there, but you could also come in the front door, and there's a lobby that supports that. So it's an improved site plan, and we think an improved floor plan that responds to some of the comments we heard. But again, what you're voting on tonight isn't so much this design, it's more the concept of building new construction on this part of the site for grades K through 6. So we have a lot of other materials if there are other questions, because we did go through those other options, but I think that sort of summarizes where we are today. And again, you're not necessarily voting on a dollar figure either. We should be careful about that. We're you know, we've been asked to give the state, you know, ballpark estimates of where we think the costs are at this point. But that really comes in the next phase, in schematic design. We'll get more precise about those numbers. Okay?
Questions?
Have we talked to the MSBA, and what's their opinion about rolling any middle high school fixes into this project with the 50% funding?
Excellent question.
Well, we sort of, I guess, asked the question a little bit differently in terms of what's the requirement that those fixes be part of this project, you know, in order to get their support. And they said we have to discuss that. They didn't have a definitive answer at this point in time. As to whether they would reimburse for some of those renovations, they say yes, it's eligible for reimbursement, these kinds of improvements, but it would be sort of taken on its own merits as a separate project, not necessarily made part of the Pembroke. Their policy is to deal with each school separately, and the construction that happens is a distinct project when it's at another site, even if it's sort of related, you know, like this would be. To them, that's still two different projects.
And at this point, there's no time to really roll that, to conclude that project at the same time this project will conclude, do we think?
Get in the pipeline and make it part of this?
Yes.
I wouldn't preclude that, but you'd have to apply, you know, right now with a statement of interest. There are some other programs they have, like to repair just roofs and windows, for instance, or called accelerated repairs. They have a science lab initiative to address just science labs. So there are some things with a little quicker timeline than a full-blown renovation. But we haven't discussed, you know, actually applying for those at this time.
And would either the MSBA process or Mike, our process, allow to bundle these together on the town meeting and vote, or do they have to be separate?
Separate.
Separate, okay.
That, the MSBA confirmed that as well.
Okay.
One issue on that, Peter Durkee has already applied for a FEMA grant, which the town would have to match 25% of for the water mitigation. So we're already on some of these issues already.
Right.
So thanks to Peter and, you know, getting on that, both there and Hurley. I think it's a total of $400,000 that he's applied for, and it sounds like they're successful.
That's great, because it is going to be in that order of magnitude, you know, to address it. It's a big site.
We have to find every way, whether it's through FEMA, through the state, to help us with those additional repairs. You know, and get that number down as low as.
One of the advantages you might say you have too is, remember that the new school, if it's built, is not going to open for a couple years here. You have a couple years you could be working on some of these repairs to the middle high school prior to that. You don't have to wait till the 6th grade's taken out to address drainage or roof leaks or, you know, some of these other issues.
Or the gym, yeah.
Well,
or
it
the
wouldn't
gym.
make any sense to change, do
Right.
any renovation to the first floor if you didn't fix the drainage.
Right,
That
exactly.
doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So we've already, I was just
That's
wanted
why
to
we
mention,
saw the
we've already
low-hanging
addressed some-
fruit as the mitigation grants, you know?
I've got a question. Earlier, when you were going over the cost of the school, and then you talked about the furnishing of the school, which added several $1 million now. And just rough numbers, the state picks up, I think, what, 49% of these costs for the new school. On the equipment and everything, is that equally shared by the state?
That's equally shared.
Equal share.
So they pick up, and that is another $10 million.
Furniture, equipment, fees, contingency, related sort of so-called soft costs, you know, are in the vicinity of $10 million on this project as proposed right now. But all of that is eligible for reimbursement at the same rate.
And these, I mean, they're pretty good costs, but these aren't the final numbers by any way stretch of the imagination. This is, right now, we're really just at the preferred option and what that's going to include.
Right.
And that's going to be the grade configuration and the site.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly.
right. You guys are gonna end up seeing those cost breakouts, again, like we gave you previously back in like November. We're doing that like all over again for this.
Okay.
So you guys will get that.
Well, I realize that when you build a new school, it's kind of like when you buy a new home, you'd like to put all brand new Ethan Allen furniture in it, but most of us have furniture we bring in from our old house. Does that mean we're not going to use the furniture from the old school in this thing at all?
No, I don't think that's the case at all.
That decision hasn't been made. You could do that.
No.
And it
I
could also
think
be used in other
there's
buildings,
another
too.
building.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But they
There's
do
some-
provide
There's-
some guidance, Chuck, on how much, like a certain amount of money allocated per student in the project for technology.
They,
let's say.
they allow a certain
Or
amount. But
there's-
if
you
you
know what I
just
mean?
bought some
There's
computers.
parameters they allow.
Yeah.
So you can't put the top of the line stuff
Their
in there
allowance
necessarily.
will allow
Right.
you to furnish and equip a school from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've obviously, bought some new furniture or bought some new computers, you can figure that in and take those with you and move into the new school.
The furniture
There's
in
no
the Pembroke
requirement
School
to
right now is the
throw it
original
away.
42-year-old furniture.
And we've been fortunate because we've been able to make some upgrades to technology there with the smart boards, and those would move over. And
Furnishing a library, for instance, the allowance would allow you to buy new library books, but obviously if you have them and materials, you can bring them over and allocate that money in some other way if
And
you
we
want
just
to,
got-
or not at all.
and we just had a donation of new library furniture within the last year or two, I believe. So that is something that certainly would be brought over. Reggie, did you have a?
Yeah, on several occasions in the past year or two, I have asked whether or not, while we're considering rebuilding the Pembroke School, that we might consider, tacking on a senior center, to the school, because we need a facility, within the community. And I understand that the state is not gonna pay for a senior center. But I was just wondering if in fact, after this whole design is completed, whether or not there would be a capability, because there's not too much room in the town to create a new senior center, land-wise, that it would be, a great idea if we could somehow tack on a senior center, on
That
the
would make
school
sense.
building with available parking, so on and so forth, so.
I'll speak to that. We don't want to blur the lines.
Right.
No, I understand that, Dave.
I'll say there will, I'll just put it this way, there'll be opportunity by freeing up, and that's not the decision, that's not part of the decision, but a byproduct of this is we'll have, I'll just say it this way, we'll have extra capacity at Pearlie.
Well,
And
so
we'll
much
go
of
from there.
blurring the lines is not having cardiac arrest from the price of what you're going to add onto this thing. So
Well, that wasn't the question, the question.
I
was-
understand that,
Well,
but that's
Reg, that will be absolutely positively,
Possible.
I'd really be excited to take a look at that, but that's not why, I just want to make pure.
No, I understand
simple-
that,
Right,
I understand that.
We have talked about,
It's very-
we have talked about expanding it
I
further.
just raised the
Allowing
question
for
and,
that.
well, because I know they're using the church down there now, right, Reggie, for a lot of that stuff.
Yes,
And
the
they really don't have a
Congregational
place.
Church,
They
right,
really
yeah.
need something.
Right.
But
If you don't mind, what's left at Pearlie when this happens?
Preschool.
Preschool.
And the
Yeah,
central
we have
office.
And-
and all the-
and
What's what type of space would open up over there? I guess in terms of square footage, rooms, or whatever.
Right. I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know where everything is kind
I
of
know that.
put
You know how
in.
much square
We
footage-
have
yeah.
a plan,
They
I
have-
think, because we
Oh, can I get-
didn't
I'm
do the same
sorry.
analysis
Sorry.
as the middle high school, but we did take a quick look
They
at
did.
it because we needed to answer the question just as you just asked. Oh, okay. But effectively, I think there are 4 or 5 classrooms for first grade and 4
There are 5 of each grade.
5 of each grade. That would be 5 kindergarten classrooms, 5 first grade classrooms that are going to be vacated with the construction of a new Pembroke school. That amount of space, some of it, one classroom will go to, I think it was 2 or 3 will go to expanded preschool. One will go to moving the art program out of the basement, which has its own facilities issues there at Pearlie. Another will go moving the music room up. Moving the special ed teachers, directors back from the high school will
We talked about 2
probably carve
offices.
up
we
1
know.
or 2 of
The
those
curriculum
spaces.
office would come to.
Yeah.
But as Dave mentioned, there's going to be space available at Pearlie that when first grade and kindergarten vacate, and it's the MSBA won't restrict you to say no, you can't use that for a senior center or you can't use it for the town. It will be available once kindergarten and first grade. So in a sense, MSBA is funding, the town to get additional space, even though they're not building you a senior
I
center.
would say Mike and team did the research too, on the original deed that allowed for civic uses, I think was one of the specific
Yes.
lists. Because it was first thought there was a concern it was school only, education only. So Mike did find on the deed that it does allow for things like the senior center within the deed preferably.
We also have some storage needs. There's a lot of
Yes, at the
spaces
high
at the high
school,
school that are still crowded.
central
So
office
there-
storage.
There is an option to use some of the basement rooms that are now occupied by art and music, to use for storage.
That was one of the high school principal's concerns when he looked at our proposed plans, was the amount of storage, and he realized, well, if we can move out some of those things that he's currently storing in his building to the Pearly, he'd be very happy.
A question, when this thing was originally given up to the FinCom and everything, I wasn't around, so didn't have the privilege of looking at it, but on the old school, now, what happens to the old school?
The old Pembroke School, it gets demolished once the new school can be occupied, and it gets turned into playing fields. So the land gets leveled.
So
It's already
part of the
leveled.
old school couldn't be used for something like what Reggie's talking about for senior citizens? I mean, I assume the whole thing is not worthless. I mean, I assume it's a structure. I mean, why couldn't something like that
There's a
be?
fair
set-
amount of investment you'd need to renovate the building, first of all. It's not, I mean.
You don't have to renovate the whole building. He's only talking about a
Yeah.
place for the seniors. He's not talking about trying to put 600 seniors in there. He's
But I
talking
would say
about-
that
Capacity at the
in
Pearly.
talking to a number of people about this center, possibility, being downtown
Near the
is a
downtown
big
center.
plus so that people can walk
Walking
to the
distance.
local restaurants and the bank and so forth. So I would say if you were going to locate a senior center, being right downtown, as long as there was parking, it would probably be a preferred option just because
Well,
of the access.
yeah, but it
And I
has
would
a
have to
dollar
say the
sign
cost.
attached to it, quite frankly. And you've got a building here
No
that
different
you
than
already
having to do
own.
with Burley. You
But
can
I
go-
understand that, but I'm talking about what Reggie was talking about, a senior center. I mean, if you've got a building there that you're just gonna demolish anyway, certainly you don't need all of it. You can take parts of it
Well,
there.
You know,
I think it is-
you know
we
what,
have
I
the
think,
space at
I
Pearly.
think what we have to
You
do
don't have to
tonight
fit it in.
is talk about the preferred option
That's
and,
correct.
and the siting of
I
it.
don't want to detract here.
And I think, I know Michelle and Ellie have had many, many meetings, and this maybe can be put on as a discussion point, to go forward, if we need to discuss it in relation to this project.
It actually
But-
can't be in relation to this
Well, actually, it
project.
can't be, so
It
forget,
can't be.
so scratch that
Right.
idea.
It won't be with
I
us.
think this begins with our board.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Both FinCom and.
Right.
Sorry about that. I think maybe the next point is
It is
just,
on our minds, and it's part of the thought process, and that, I think, was Reggie's original question.
Yeah.
Rather than coming to a solution tonight on the senior center.
yeah, I think maybe what we do is, once we go down this road, we figure out what the excess space is and then go from there.
Right.
I want to know where the Selectmen's Fitness Center was going to be. That's just my
It's
opinion.
right next to the school committee pool.
I just want to keep it bomb.
Stay in good shape.
All right, so
So at this point, the school building committee has reviewed all of the information that you just saw this evening. Had a lot of conversation about it, and with the recommendation provided by DRA and municipal, we did vote to stay with our first decision, our first votes of the K through 6 grade configuration. And the school building committee is asking you to also vote to support that decision, to remain with the K through 6 grade configuration. We feel it makes the most sense. And I think that Carl did an excellent job of using the space that will be vacated by grade 6 and showing us how that really will be enough of a free space area in the high school.
Well, you're not just looking for the grade configuration approval, though. You're asking for an approval of the grade configuration of K through 6 located south of the school and in a new building.
Right, and you've already voted on that, but it's a reaffirming vote.
but we need to revote.
We would like a
We
vote.
need you to revote
We
on
need to
all three of
revote the
those
three
things.
pieces,
Right.
right? Excuse me, Dave.
Can I speak from being on the school building committee now, not as a selectman? The actual motion was, the preferred option was K through 6 with the school in the woods, with consideration of the improvements to the high school. If you go back and look at the actual
Right.
vote, we included that with consideration to the improvements presented to the high school. So I think that's part of this, that I don't want people to forget that, because to me, if we're gonna go forward with this option, we have to make, for this whole thing to work properly, we do have to do the renovations at the high school. So that's me coming from the other committee.
But would you, would that still be the case, David, if the money was not going to be matched by MSBA?
But it's still a
Because
consideration.
Because I think that's very much a question mark, based on the MSBA meeting I attended the other day. That they're very pleased with, the study that was done. They understand that there's a need for additional renovations, but they were not willing to say that they would share in the cost of those renovations at a reimbursement rate. As Carl said, they did say, we might entertain another project. But they also said they would expect the town to be able to would be willing to commit the money to it as well. So I'm just, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just telling you.
I think.
But
Coming
again,
from
I'm
the
just
building
asking,
committee?
is if it comes out of the town's pocketbook, is that
Right.
understood in that motion, or are you
Right
assuming
now,
there's
I
going to
think
be a
from the
shared
building committee
reimbursement?
standpoint, we want to make sure that it stays on the table, that we are still considering all this additional work that we just did. We know that there are issues at the high school, and we want that to stay on the table.
Yeah.
We're not voting that it is going to be part of the project, because we don't even know from the MSBA if we are going to have to do anything. We don't have that answer yet with the high school, with this
Correct,
project.
they haven't said
Right,
it.
we
And I
don't
think
know.
from a
So
They
that's
haven't
why-
linked it at all, that it's
I think from a
contingent.
technical
Exactly.
perspective, we have one project, which is which is to look at an elementary school project, which is either a reno add, or new build.
Right.
That was what we started out with.
Right, so yeah, we're going back to that very first vote that we took, is what we're doing.
Right.
So it's the grade configuration, it's the location,
And it's the new
it's the
building.
new building.
Yep.
So it's those three, and like Dave said,
We
from
need-
our
Consideration,
perspective,
doesn't mean
it was
Right.
consideration, so that everybody knows that there are other issues on the table with the middle high school that we are still considering and going forward with, along with this
To
project.
me, it's like, buy 3 brand new tires and leave a bald one on.
Right, no, I
It
mean,
doesn't make sense.
Right.
You gotta do,
Right, I
I
mean-
think it's a package.
yeah, and if
Way we
MSBA
go.
thought enough to halt us
Right.
to come back and relook at it,
But I don't think it can be
cautioning you.
packaged.
No, I understand.
No.
That's fine.
There's a difference between a consideration and our ability, because as a building committee, we can't do anything about that.
Right.
We just want to be conscious of it.
Well, let me ask you, I make sure I got this right. So, when we're talking dollars and cents, I realize these are just projections, because we really don't know. But I've been around long enough to know it always costs more than what they say it will. I mean,
Right.
been on too many projects in my life. So we got 36 million in rough costs for the building,
to construct.
construct it. Got another 10 million in rough costs for the outfit it, and another million something for the high school. So we're bumping pretty close to $50 million
$2 million.
for this project.
$2 million.
1.4.
$50 million. That's a lot of, even if you're only paying 49%. And of course, we know that on the site construction, we eat most of that because the state only pays 6% of the total cost towards site construction, right? So that means out of that $7 million, we're going to be footing the bill for $5 million of that. They're only going to be footing the bill about $2 million of that, right?
They do 8%.
Yeah. Oh, is it 8%? All right. So maybe we're only footing the bill for $4 million of the $7 million. But the bottom line is, that's $50 million. Wow, that's a lot of money.
If I could ask, what's that work out to the cost for the residents and the
Oh,
taxpayers?
I think you're way ahead of things.
I was going to say, well, no,
I can answer that.
But we need to,
But
I'm
we-
here for a reason, and I'd like to know what the
I got the
cost
answer for you because I
is.
worked it out this afternoon.
Okay.
There's a little over 3,000 homes in this area. And if you take what we're going to do, it's going to work out to an increase of property tax just as a rule. Obviously, some people have, depending on how they do it, about $1,000 per household increase in property taxes. Just to pay the note on a 25-year note to pay off about $25 million. And actually, it could be more than that. Depends upon what they actually pick up on this
I
construction
think we
site.
need to be careful when we start putting numbers out there. And
No, I think you really have to put the numbers to
But-
really have a sober look at it of what it's really costing you and the people here in the town. It's a great idea. and
We
I-
don't know. I mean, it's disingenuous for us to sit here and say it's going to cost us nearly $50 million when we haven't even gone through the design phase yet.
But
That's when we need to start taking a hard
But you already
look.
have the projections, and we've all been around here long enough to know you've seen costs. When do you ever see somebody come in 20% under what they? It's always over.
Can I just say, I mean, we're going forward with this project for the school. I mean, the bottom line
I just want to
is-
make sure I understood from the financial board that it's a $50 million project. Is what we're talking about when you include all the goodies.
Could
It's
be
$50 million.
Chuck,
Might
could
be
be
46.
45.
Could be 45.
could be
Could be
50.
20.
And then, but
you get some
ultimately,
points
it's
for
going to come up to
green
the voters.
technology.
It's going to be on the ballot. It's going to be a
Yes.
town. It's going to be up to the voters to decide when the cost comes. What our job right now that we're charged with is coming up with the best educational project for Georgetown. That's what we're here for right now. That's our goal.
I would argue that you also need to take into consideration the citizens of this town and whether they can all afford it, because there were other options. But it seems that, this committee has had new school on its mind ever since. So how do you?
I disagree with that. I disagree
Let
with
me put out
that.
there that we appointed a board to make a decision.
Yes.
It is up to the citizens to decide if they can afford
Okay.
it, not these committee. That's why we have a vote. We can
And
talk
let's-
about
and
it at
let's be
work.
clear, the
goal is to
board-
create an opportunity for the vote so the citizens can decide as a town if they want to move it forward. For
The-
anyone here to say yes they can or no they can't, doesn't make sense.
We-
That's why we vote.
And it's clear, and we have to remember, it's a town board. It was appointed, not, it's one member from the school committee, one member from the Board of Selectmen, and the rest are at large.
And
I
finance
remember
committee.
that.
One from the
And
finance committee.
And the
as well.
finance committee, excuse me.
Gary, to say that we had new school on our mind from the beginning is really disingenuous, to be honest with you, because that was not, I sat through 95% of the meetings, go look at the attendance. That was not the case. We went there with an open book and said, okay, where do we start? And we worked with the MSBA, we have a project manager, we went through every single scenario.
Never even looked, David, at 2 through 6, okay?
But
with
that's
a
not a new,
simple addition.
yeah, but Gary, that's not a, listen, that's not a, solution to the problem. If you sat through all the meetings, you would see, we went through all of those scenarios, Gary.
I went to a lot of meetings.
Right?
But
That
how
was
many
every
s- I
one
mean,
of them.
we've got-
We did not go in there and say, okay, let's see how we can get away with building a new school. And that's what you're insinuating.
We started
That's not the way things happen.
5 years ago, working with, is there a way to keep the Pembroke School? And our team here, they did an assessment that I think you said there was 70%, about 70% or so would cost versus a new school. And that ratio was so high that it doesn't make sense from a business perspective,
From an
a
economic
building
standpoint.
perspective, from an economic standpoint, to try to fix an old building like that. So we've gone through a lot of that.
40-year-old building.
That
But
was
Gary-
designed to be,
But Gary,
have a
the costs are too small.
useful lifespan of 40
And-
years.
doesn't accommodate.
This
That I
building,
find hard
what's
to
the
believe.
building
I- you
lifespan
know,
on
you
this?
keep
Wasn't
going
designed
back
for
to
the
that.
last-
Who designs a building today or back in that days, the last 40 years? I think what you're picking up, Phil, with the 40 years thing is that's what they thought it might last before it needs an addition or something. I don't think anybody built that building expecting in 40 years we're gonna turn it into rubble and start over again.
Yeah, I think if you look at the average house, and I looked at this, what the average age of homes were in Georgetown, and believe me, 40 years is young. So the average houses in Georgetown overall are much, much older than that, and we're not demolishing them. So your point's well taken on that, Gary. But at the same time, I certainly understand what Phil is talking about, where the useful life for what it was built for the students and everything, and all had that life expectancy. But yeah, it's not just. When I brought up what Reggie was talking about, you don't just throw it away just because it's 20 years old or whatever it happens to be.
But I think we need to rely on what the building committee was charged with, to look at all the options and to rely on the information that they gathered and the work that our project manager and our architect did. And for us to discount that work at this point, I don't think is fair.
Well, I don't think anybody's discounting it. I can remember whenever I first got involved with
But
the town here a little over a year ago, when we were talking a new school at that time, they're projecting somewhere around 25 million.
This is the problem with
Now we're talking double that number, and that was.
25 million
No, the
after
25
numbers
million is
here,
what we're
right
doing.
About where we said.
25 million
No,
is half.
that's not true, Dave. When we were talking about this thing, I remember well, because even I thought it was 25 million was high then, and we weren't talking about half, it was talking about the cost of the project.
Yeah, that would have been a cost of a reno.
Well, can I say this? We've had meetings beyond meetings, public meetings with a lot of, again, I don't want to stifle people's questions, but these are very specific questions that should have been asked at these meetings. This has
Agreed.
all been vetted, it's been on TV, it's been, we're here tonight, in my opinion, to take a look, whether you support K through 6, new school. If you don't, I would say, a matter of fact, this is a selectman meeting, I would entertain a motion to approve our support the K. No, well, no.
You do it. No, go ahead.
I'm on a roll.
Yeah, go.
I entertain a motion to support the K through 6 new school in the woods with consideration to the improvements to the high school.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
All
Our
right.
vote's done. I entertain a motion to adjourn Board of Selectmen meeting.
Second. So moved. So moved.
No, everybody
All in
wants
favor?
to stay longer.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
All right.
Motion carries. The Selectmen
Stay a
meeting is
little
over.
longer.
No, you
All
can
right.
ask your
You can
questions,
stay a
Gary,
little
that's fine.
All right.
Moving on.
The school committee will now take their vote, and the chair will entertain a motion to approve the Pembroke Elementary School proposed
New building
new building,
in the woods.
new building in the woods, comprised of grades K through 6 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Do you want to add the consideration?
Oh, with further and I'd like to add Laura to that.
Withdraw my motion.
Okay. And with consideration to the middle high school capital repairs and programmatic renovations required.
You got all that, Laura?
Okay, so moved. No.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No more money.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right.
Thank you very much.
Moving right along. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the time and effort that's gone into it. All right, moving right along.
Hey, Ellie. Hey, Ellie. It's only been, what, 10 years? Yeah. 10 years now?
Yes, that's only been like 10 years.
Well, the kids won't stop.
Night you chose.
He's looking around like, all right. Moving right along. Okay, superintendent's report. Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. FEMA mitigation grant from
Absolutely.
Mike Anderson. Did anyone have any questions regarding that?
I don't know where we are.
Is Carol included the email from Mike, and it outlines the share to fix the high school as well as the Pearly water issue that he described. It looks like we would be required to pay $50,000 for each of those repairs if FEMA went ahead and was able to mitigate the issue that we have. So the chair will entertain a motion to proceed with the FEMA,
Pursue the writing of the FEMA.
to pursue the FEMA grant writing as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Sorry about that confusion. Moving right along to the superintendent's report. Anyone have any questions with that? There's nothing we really need to talk about, is there?
No, I just mentioned the vacancy of the middle high school band director, which is a
Mr.
very significant loss to us.
Parents are very upset. I've heard from many of them.
I know. The students are very upset, but, I think it's also important, to know that he isn't leaving because he's unhappy here. He's not leaving because he's got another job. He's leaving because he's got a very prestigious opportunity to pursue his master's degree in a very competitive program. Basically, he's following his dream. He wants to be a conductor, and he wants to do it on a larger stage, either in some kind of professional capacity with a major orchestra, or something related to like a college or university band. And this is once in a lifetime opportunity for him, and he of course has mixed feelings. He's very optimistic, and actually we have received quite a few resumes and applications, so we're moving forward aggressively to replace Mr. Seepy, but I think we all will feel his loss, because in his short time here, he's taken the music program to the next level. He and Laura LaFlamme are a fabulous team. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that Corey would not be returning next year.
And it will be a great loss for all of us, but best of luck to him.
Best of luck
It's a
to
great
him,
opportunity.
absolutely. It is a great opportunity.
We are still continuing to look for a special education director. We had several interviews and hoping that
Site visits.
Interviews on site visits. So hopefully we'll be bringing forth a candidate soon.
Yes.
Any questions on the superintendent's information for the committee? Okay, line item transfers. Any questions regarding those? They seemed pretty straightforward. Chair will entertain a motion to approve line item transfers numbered 190 through 215 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Subcommittee reports. Budget and Finance, we just had a brief meeting before this to talk about athletics, and we're still moving along with that discussion. Next up, governance, Ann?
We had a brief meeting, and I don't see it in here, I had it out, oh, yes, I do, here it is. We have a first reading tonight of the admissions for children of non-resident professional staff, and I would like to modify it now, ahead of the second reading. Just to, wait a minute. We said we were going to do a lottery if the request for placement exceeded our numbers. But it would be up to the school committee to decide how many we were going to take in, and the superintendent. And then, rather than it be a lottery, if there are one or two extras, we would make it based on seniority
Okay.
for the teachers.
All right.
It's just in the third paragraph. And this will be determined based on, instead of lottery, change it to seniority.
Oh, okay, that last line.
Yes.
Okay.
So
All
I'll
right.
go for a vote next time.
All right, so next meeting we'll be voting.
But does anybody have any questions though, or because this is your opportunity to, if you're going to make any, if anybody has any questions that we need to go back and make have further discussion about, right? That's probably
Any
a good time
discussions?
to ask any questions.
Questions?
Any questions?
All right. Negotiating. We are having an executive session after this to discuss our ongoing negotiations with the teachers union. So,
And we have a meeting on the 23rd.
correct. Next negotiating meeting is the 23rd. Okay, moving right along to new business. Music department donation. We had a very generous donation by, it's not anonymous, so I can say it, by Mr. Jim Smith toward the purchase of a new piano in the music department. And once again, we're extremely grateful for all parents, residents, and friends of the schools that always step up and make these incredible donations. It helps us get our work done very nicely. The chair will entertain a motion to accept the donation from Jim Smith to the music program to be used toward the purchase of a new piano as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next is another donation, which is technology, which a parent donated or several computers for use at the Pembroke School. So the chair will entertain a motion to accept the computer donation from John Billington to the Pembroke School as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Do you want to just do the other ones and come back to school choice, Ann?
Yeah.
The other ones are pretty quick.
Warrant, the next,
Ours doesn't require a vote. This
We don't
is-
need a
this is the
vote.
First reading.
School choice is just, we're
This is
not
the first
discussing.
reading.
It's just
I'm
the
sorry.
first
Vote.
reading.
require a vote,
yep.
Okay, I thought, I was just making the suggestion that since school choice is C, that Ann might want to do D, E, and
I
F,
thought-
and then
No,
go
it's
We're
back.
not-
policy.
The policy. It says
Oh.
school choice, first
Oh,
reading, and
oh,
policy
okay.
JFA. Oh,
Okay,
Oh,
that's
the-
why it was confusing.
separate, oh.
That's
We
why
have to
it was
vote on
confusing
school
to me.
choice. Okay, so this really,
Sorry.
first reading doesn't need to be in there. Okay, school choice. Why don't we just keep going with this? So it looks like we have 5 openings in grade 1 and
I thought we had 5 openings in K.
We're recommending.
that's what I'm confused about.
No,
I see
no.
5 in grade 1.
Okay. That's true, Ann. There are 5 in grade 1.
Okay.
In kindergarten,
It's not on here.
right, nope, keep reading this. This is the memo you're looking at, right? So kindergarten.
So we're gonna increase the class size and open up 5 spots?
No. That's not how I'm reading it. Oh, I think what the point we're trying to make in kindergarten, because it's a projection at this point, right? So if we have currently 83 registered, we're assuming we may see an additional 10 students, because that's kind of our, it's kind of been our process. So we may have 93 students with 5 teachers. Basically, the average class size is 18.6.
So if we
19.
add 5,
If we add 5, the average class size would be
so
19.
the class size will go
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Well, that's
19.6
not,
is acceptable.
well, no, maybe I'm not clear there. This year, the class sizes are basically 19.
Okay,
I'm
that's,
saying that this is based on projections for next year.
so we're currently at a class size of 19?
Yes. Yes. So, that's what
Okay, so
we're-
it's gonna go up
So
half a
you're
student.
recommending 5
We're
slots
recommending
for
5
kindergarten.
slots for kindergarten. That's what we're recommending.
And 5 spots for grade 1?
Yep, and then the other thing that's being recommended is 5 slots at the high school, primarily in 9th grade. There also is a situation where.
That's where I have, okay.
Well, okay, that's just for discussion, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing I'd like the committee to consider is opening 1 slot at the 11th, I believe it's the 11th grade level for, primarily for a special education student who's been was out of the district, came back into the district in our program. Parent had to move out of the area, but wants the child to remain in our program because he's been successful. And the only way that can be done is through school choice.
We had a similar situation of a student a couple of years ago
Yeah.
who lived in town and because of circumstances had to leave and wanted to stay. And because we didn't allow, that we didn't have school choice
I
at her
think
grade
we-
level, we didn't allow them
I
to stay.
think that child stayed.
No.
No,
I
she
thought we
didn't.
made.
No, she
Oh,
didn't.
she's a superstar in Ipswich.
So if,
I guess I don't remember who
And
we're
if
talking
it's-
about,
and
so
if
that's, we
it's-
can't talk about it anyway, but.
and if it's, school choice, don't we have to open it up to anybody? We
Yeah,
can't,
We can't
we can't
designate
be
it just for
selective.
him.
Yeah,
Well, we,
Her.
no, I'm just saying we open up a slot, and obviously if there's interest beyond that, we have to do the lottery, but
Right.
we haven't, the history has proven that there hasn't been interest in, usually spots at the 11th or 12th grade level, just because it doesn't really make sense for somebody to transition in for, we've had that discussion at the committee level before, remember? We didn't want to bring kids
Yeah.
in for 2 years. But this would be it for a particular reason.
So-
If it can't be done, it can't be done, but I'm just bringing it up that the request,
what I'm confused about is if we have a grade 8 middle school class size right now of 131, the current grade 8 is going up to grade 9 next year. Is that how I'm reading this?
yes.
Okay. So we're saying that at grade 9 right now, you have 104 students. And we didn't take any choice students last year in the high school, but with 131 going up, we can take.
Peter's looking at it strictly as the number of total students.
I know
in the
that, but
building,
we're going
because
up
the
more.
kids- Because sometimes 9th graders and 10th graders are in the same classes, so it's not equivalent to what happens at the middle school, for example, where the average class size is 25 kids. The
But
same kids move, you know what I mean?
Right, but we're graduating exactly what we're bringing up. I'm not seeing that. I mean, I saw his math
coming-
of coming up
that's
with
the
five,
math,
and last year we couldn't bring 5 kids in. That's what I'm confused about.
No, last year the recommendation from the principal was we could bring 5 kids in. We didn't entertain it because we.
Oh, we didn't. I
we
don't
didn't
remember.
entertain it.
Okay.
Yeah. That you never saw that because it didn't make it to you.
Ah, okay, that's why.
Because I knew I knew
Yeah.
where we were going with that, especially with the 150
Not with the big middle school coming
students. Yeah.
So we're still in that same situation.
I think, Jim will also point out that our budget is predicated on having a certain amount of money in the school choice revolving account. And, again, it's obviously the committee's decision and, we'll support it, but we are in a situation where we have to be able to fund the $33,000 in athletics,
Yep.
the $30,000 in technology leases, and 3 positions.
Teachers, right?
3 teaching
Plus
positions.
the supervisor of the crossing guards, the
School
safety officer.
Oh,
He's in there
and
too.
that's up for
Yeah.
discussion as to whether or not, we continue to do that in another year. But that's what's in the account right now in terms of what's being charged.
All right, so we're looking to add, just to recap, 5 at grade 1, 5 in kindergarten,
Yes.
and 5 at grade 9 next year.
Correct. And not to muddy the water, but, depending on how we vote on the policy for the students from the teachers, the majority of those interested in taking advantage of that this year, based on the survey that the union president did, they are all kindergarten. So, the problem, we are insisting that they apply through school choice, because we cannot afford to have those slots not filled. But if you have, let's say we have 10 people from outside be interested in those slots as well, and we have to do a lottery. We may be in a situation where, let's say, out of the 6 interested people, there are 3 that get selected. All right, so now we have 3 that can come in through school choice, and we fill the 5 slots with the other 2 from out of the district that aren't students, children of teachers. Then the policy would, require, I guess, the committee to then determine whether or not those other 3 people would be able to be admitted.
And that would be based on seniority for them.
Right,
Yeah.
but the challenge will be that would mean 8 students, not
Right.
5 students.
But we're gonna have to
But we're
cross.
still under
That's-
20,
yeah.
even at 5 we're still
I
under
understand,
20.
but I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's just something to consider.
All right, do we want any questions, comments?
Everyone's again. Well, for the benefit of my new colleagues, I've voted against school choice how many times? 5?
Every year.
Every year. And I think it's ironic that we just had a
Consistent.
meeting about building a new school because we don't have space and we want to bring in kids from out of district. It makes no sense to me. And secondly, I've talked to other towns, superintendents, for Marblehead and Masco and other places, and they don't have school choice. In fact, more than half the districts in the state do not have school choice. So it's not like we'd be like
Beverly
rebels.
just stopped.
So, and the reason, it's because of space, and it's because of, it's a funding trap. So whenever time I hear,
We
we
agree.
need to fund that slush fund because the school choice account is going down, that's not the reason, that's not the purpose of school choice. That's not what it was designed for, to make money for the district. And that's why places like Marblehead and Masco and others don't do school choice.
And unfortunately,
So-
we've
Our
had
problem is we have teachers on the.
we've fallen right into the funding trap.
Sure.
I mean,
Well, we got out of the funding trap and we had to
Right.
go back in unless we wanted to, if our budget wanted to go up 3.5%, which is still a tough sell for the town, then we either had to cut, which again, we can still do. We had to cut or we had to put it on alternative funding sources. We said at the time when we recommended it, we hated it. It was not where we wanted to be. But, what the other option is, we reduce. We reduce $200,000 or $300,000 in staff. That's the other option.
Is that the number? Roughly.
Well, right now, so let's do the math quickly. So I
Roughly,
think
we get
had-
$5,000.
I think we had roughly $150,000 in salaries. Well, maybe more than that, if there's
Yeah,
human
you do.
resources officers
It's
in
more
there.
money. 50, 100, you got about 170,000.
Yeah.
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 in salaries.
And that's the salaries, and then in addition to that, we have
33.
33, yeah.
33, and then the 30 for the wireless at the high school.
But we get how much, what do we receive for each school choice?
It depends.
It's about 5,000.
It's about,
five.
so
Five is
basically
the-
it's,
It depends.
5 to 55, yeah.
use
Especially-
use roughly $5,000 per school choice student that comes in is our income. So it would be 75,000. That we're looking at for next year.
And generally, the revolving account we used to have like 67 students, I think, at one point. And then because we haven't been admitting additional students, and not replacing the students, right, as they graduate, the number has gone down to, I believe we have 29 students now. So the amount of money I think we're planning on next year for the number of kids that we have already coming in is about $149,000.
It is. Yep.
So
What's the escape clause from this down the road?
Next year, you don't, if you don't want it, you just don't vote it in.
We don't,
And you will
No,
vote
we
what-
shouldn't be funding athletics from out
Oh,
of
that-
it.
Yeah.
We certainly shouldn't have teacher salaries on it
Absolutely
because
not.
it's a revolving account. It's not, it's made
It's not
from one-time
sustainable.
expenses.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, new textbooks, new curriculum,
Right.
that's what you're supposed to use the choice money for. You're not
Yeah.
supposed to use for recurring
Yeah.
expenses.
When I did it before for when we did the full day kindergarten, we had to put a couple of salaries on there, and then as we were able to, we moved them back into the budget for exactly that reason. The problem is that, obviously if we move $167,000 back in the budget, at 1% of our budget being $127,000, our budget would have gone up another percent and 1.3.
yeah, 1.5%.
Yeah.
So,
Unfortunately, as Dave said, I think we're all in agreement. We want to try to avoid it being a funding trap.
For sure.
But,
yeah.
I don't think anyone would argue with that.
yeah.
All right.
So anyway, my recommendation to the committee is to vote against this recommendation. School
Is to not
department.
is to
Is to
not
not
accept,
open any
to not
I don't want to
accept.
close school, they can keep school choice open, but
But you don't want to
I'm
accept new
going to vote
students.
to not accept new students.
All right.
I don't think opening it up at the high school is wise. I just don't.
I
mean, it's crowded. It's always crowded. And that's what we hear over and over, is it's so
So
crowded.
you're saying that it would be okay you would support the kindergarten and first grade, but not the high school, is that?
Yeah, she's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think at the kindergarten and first grade level, we're not changing class size.
I could support that.
Those classes are much,
Oh,
those
I know.
sizes,
Agree,
class
but
sizes are
that's
so
not
smaller.
So, and I could support that,
The K and the one.
yeah. If it's not gonna have a serious
change the
impact on.
dynamics of the classroom.
No.
One
It won't.
student is not going to make a difference, and like she said, the numbers are projections for kindergarten anyway. We don't know that we're gonna get 10 more. We may get one,
We may get one.
we may get 12.
Yeah.
But you don't know,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that would be inconsistent with the trends, but you're
Right.
right, it could happen.
Right.
And we'll be bringing in grade 8 is 131 right now. You typically lose, what does he say, 7%
To private school.
to other schools. So that would get you down to 10% is 13.6. So that would get you down to like 125 students, and we're graduating 126 this year. So you'd keep the high school exactly where it is right now.
And an obvious question, if everybody's in agreement that counting a budget based on school choice is not good business, if everybody's in agreement on that, why are we doing it at all?
Because we have the salaries on the
Because-
budget, on that account. We have to pay for those teachers. We can't move them
Yeah.
off now.
Well,
Not
we
this year
can, we
anyway.
just need to cut
Well, then
that
you
money
cut
out
somewhere
of
else.
it.
We need to cut somewhere else. We'll need to cut whatever we're funding out of choice needs to go under the regular budget, and would have to make cuts to that dollar amount.
So then why?
I'd rather cut the athletics.
So then my question is still the same question then, but why then add any new school choice?
One of the things with school choice is if you have excess capacity,
Right.
extra seats in the room, you can fill them. But the idea is not to fill them so that you have to spend more money
Right.
to educate the children. And we're saying in K and 1, we have extra seats, if you will. But at the high school, we're graduating 126. We're bringing somewhere between 131 down to 125, 126. If you follow the normal 7% that leave, you're staying the same. So you really don't have space. So we've tried to make
You don't
it a
have excess capacity.
We've tried to make it a capacity decision as opposed to a revenue decision.
Absolutely, we are, but we just want you to know
It's also-
what the
Yeah.
amount of money is that
what
we.
it is. It's
that-
also a revenue decision.
Right, exactly.
And the bottom line is, I don't think we'd have any trouble filling the K. And again, since it's adding one student to each class as opposed to, because one of the things we all care about is that we have reasonable class sizes. We
Right.
understand that in the lower primary grades, that's where students really need to make sure they get the great foundation. And there are kindergarten assistants in each.
Yep.
In each kindergarten, so, that obviously, makes the adult to student ratio smaller and more reasonable.
All
I
right.
think it's unlikely that we will fill all 5 first grade slots, to be honest with you.
I doubt it.
And that's also a concern. I'm confident we would fill 9 freshman slots, and I'm confident we would fill 5 kindergarten slots, but I'm not confident we're gonna fill 5 first grade slots. Just for
Yeah, I'm sure
the
we
good
would
of the
fill the high
order.
school slots, but I think that it would be to the detriment of the existing high school
Listen,
students.
now I'm not bringing it forward because I
Yeah.
love the recommendation.
Right.
I'm bringing it forward and honestly saying to you, we have a revenue challenge here. So depending on whatever way we go, the bottom line has to be the bottom line,
Yep.
and we may have to come back to you with some recommendations,
gonna have
which
to
we
make-
will do for reductions if we can't balance the budget.
And you're saying no to the upper limits, to the upper grades because of size?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I said, we don't love it either.
We're talking about building a new school because of the overcrowding in the middle high school. It's absurd to me.
The kids are going to continue to move through too.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so who's going to make a motion here?
I mean, I can make a motion
Okay.
to recommend that we open school choice for 5 slots in K and 5 slots in grade 1 for the 2012-2013 school year.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion in a second.
Yeah.
I
so
move.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
we're set.
yeah.
We just
Yep.
need a vote.
We just need to vote. Yep.
Discussion, right?
Oh, yeah,
So,
discussion.
any
the-
further discussion?
The only question I have is regarding
know
the kids or teachers, that's for next meeting, right? So this has nothing to do
This,
with that.
that has
correct?
nothing to do with this,
Right.
correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Okay. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
All right, thank you. All right, moving right along to warrant article for the Georgetown Middle High School generator.
Right, and this doesn't require any vote, this
Okay.
is just for your information.
So we're working on, hopefully getting a generator for the middle high school.
Well, apparently, this last
At the
town meeting or
meeting, yeah.
something, there was $1,000 already appropriated, so this is just doing the paperwork behind the scenes to
So-
get
And
it
this
done.
generator is, my understanding, this generator was originally wanting to be purchased because if there is a catastrophic event in the town and we need to use the high school as a shelter and the power's out, they need to be able to keep people
Right now,
warm.
for example, they can't use the kitchen.
Right.
Right,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, we need to increase the middle school activity account
Yeah.
to process the payments for the Camp Kiev trip, which already occurred, so, anyway.
You do that
Wonder for
every,
the next one.
you do that every year.
Yeah, oh, is this for the next, but we
The
didn't
eighth
approve it
grade?
for the first one.
Oh, yeah.
No, we didn't do this
This
for the
is-
first one,
Yeah, this is the one you do for the 6th grade, I believe.
that already happened.
Yes.
Interesting. The chair will entertain a motion to temporarily increase the, can I just hold off for a second? Scratch that. Do we need to increase it to like June 15th because the grade 8 class is going
Or is that
at the
separate?
end of May? Why don't I'm going to
You can do
amend it.
that. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, so the chair will entertain a motion to temporarily increase the middle school student activity account maximum from 10,000 to 30,000 for the period of April 2nd, 2012 to June 15th, 2012 for the purpose of processing receipts and payments for the students attending Camp Kiev.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is surplus materials from Pearlie due to the flooding. Margaret gave us a list of stuff that needs to be declared surplus. So the chair will entertain a motion to declare the list of Pearlie items as surplus and will be disposed of properly per school policy as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
At this point, we are going to adjourn out of regular session, go into executive session, and we will not be returning to regular session. And we are going into executive session under Chapter 30A, Section 21, Paragraph 3, for the purposes of negotiating, or discussing negotiations.
Roll call vote.
It's a roll call vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. We're all in executive session.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye, thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.